Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at this editorial from page number 6 of the Delhi edition. This article deals with the unique opportunity that has opened up for India and Maldives at the United Nations. See, India and Maldives are two close neighbors in South Asia, and they have a history of close collaboration at several multilateral forums and institutions. For example, at the United Nations, both India and Maldives have constantly pushed for UN reforms, and Maldives in particular has always been supportive of India's demand for the expansion of the permanent membership of the UN Security Council and for the inclusion of India in this reformed and expanded UNSC. At other multilateral forums as well, such as the Climate Change Convention, India and Maldives have often taken a similar stand and they have often backed each other's positions. So the close bilateral relations between the two countries gets reflected at such multilateral forums as well. And currently a great opportunity has opened up for the two countries to further step up their collaboration at the UN. Because see, for the period 2021 to 2022, India would be functioning as a non-permanent member to the UN Security Council. Last year, India won a non-permanent seat at the UNSC, and it will continue holding this seat for a 2-year term. Then recently, Maldives has won the presidency to the UN General Assembly by contesting an election at the UNGA, and the Foreign Minister of Maldives will hold the presidency to UNGA for the period 2021 to 22. See, both the UNGA and the UN Security Council are two key organs of the UN. While the UNSC decides upon key matters such as peace and stability, sanctions, authorization of use of force, counterterrorism, disarmament, etc., the UNGA also plays a critical role in the overall affairs of the UN. While the UNGA is more of a democratic institution that provides for membership to all the countries with an equal vote, the UNSC in comparison is an elite club of the P5 countries or the 5 permanent members who almost enjoy complete monopoly of the functioning of the UN through their veto power. So at the UNSC, which comprises of 15 members in total, that is 10 non-permanent and 5 permanent members, the presidency is held on the basis of rotation amongst these 15 member countries for a period of 1 month. So at UNSC, the presidency keeps rotating every month amongst the 15 member countries. Whereas at the UNGA, the president is elected for a 1-year term, and all the members of the UN get to contest these elections on a regional basis, and they get to nominate their respective candidates, usually their foreign ministers, to contest in these UNGA presidency elections. So the country which wins the election gets to appoint its foreign minister as the president of the UNGA, and the country gets to hold the presidency. Now, this role of presidency is very crucial because the presidency gets to decide the subject matter and the issues that are going to be discussed, and the country holding the presidency plays a key role in tabling resolutions which are further taken up for voting at these UN institutions. So now, when India happens to be a non-permanent member at the UN Security Council, India will get to hold the presidency for 2 months. And throughout this 2-year period, India will be playing a key role at the UN. At the same time, India's close friend and ally, Maldives, has won the UNGA presidency. And this coincidence presents a great opportunity for both India and Maldives to push their mutual issues and concerns at the UN. In fact, when the elections took place recently for the presidency of the UNGA, there were 2 primary contestants. One was Maldives and the other was Afghanistan. See, now, India has good relations with both the countries. In fact, last year, when India won the non-permanent seat to the UN Security Council, it was because of Afghanistan's support. Afghanistan actually sacrificed its candidature to allow India to win this non-permanent seat. So naturally, Afghanistan was expecting India to return the favor because this happens to be a crucial year for Afghanistan. As you might know, the US troops in Afghanistan are being withdrawn as per the US Taliban deal, and the political structure within Afghanistan is undergoing a major change. And the future of Afghanistan and the future of its ongoing civil war is going to be determined in the coming months. So considering these significant upcoming developments, Afghanistan was hoping to win the UNGA presidency with India's support. But India had already pledged its support to the candidate of Maldives because Maldives had announced its candidature way back in November 2020, whereas Afghanistan, on the other hand, brought up its candidature only in January 2021, by which time India had already committed its support to Maldives. So, based on this earlier commitment, India decided to go ahead with supporting Maldives' candidature for UNGA presidency. And with India's support, Maldives has won these elections. Now, see, in Maldives, since 2019, under the Ibrahim Soleh government, the Modi government has enjoyed very good relations. And the political instability that Maldives had seen during this period has more or less come to an end. And India and Maldives currently enjoy very close strategic and defense relations. So these two close bilateral partners are getting a great opportunity at the UN to work together on mutual issues and concerns that are affecting South Asia, especially the impact of the pandemic, measures taken to contain the spread of the pandemic, vaccine distribution, and ensuring equitable access to vaccines, and other common issues and goals such as the SDG targets, climate change, etc. Then, since the strategic interests of India and Maldives coincides, this is also a great opportunity for India and Maldives to collaborate and work together on subjects such as counter-terrorism at the United Nations. For decades together, India has been the victim of state-sponsored terrorism, and it has been trying very hard at the UN to raise this issue, and it has even brought out a convention at the UN known as the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism. Of late, even Maldives has been dealing with the threat of terrorism and rising radicalism and fundamentalism. And even in this case, there exists a Pakistani connection. Just like Pakistan is known to sponsor terrorism against India, Pakistan is also known to have funded several radical organizations and institutions in Maldives, which is directly responsible for rising fundamentalism in Maldives. As a result, the ideology of terror groups like ISIS has gained a lot of popularity in Maldives, and India even has reasons to believe that Pakistan's ISI was looking to turn Maldives into a base against India, through which terror attacks could be mounted against India. So, this opportunity at the UN, where both India and Maldives are going to hold key positions, will provide a great opportunity to bring up issues of counterterrorism, particularly to target state sponsorship of terrorism. Then both the countries can take forward their commitment towards UN reforms and push for changing the old and outdated power structures of this key global multilateral institution. As I mentioned earlier, both India and Maldives they concur that the UN is an outdated organization with regard to its structure, and they both believe that the UNSC cannot be allowed to remain as an elite club belonging only to the P5 countries. For several decades, India has been pushing for the expansion of membership to UNSC, along with a decision on the veto power to be enjoyed by the UN permanent members. Maldives, being a close friend and neighbor of India, has always supported this cause of India, and hence this would be a great opportunity for both the countries to further push for UN reforms. Then, for India in particular, this is also a great opportunity because over the last few months, Turkey and Pakistan have been creating several challenges for India over the Kashmir conflict and over controversial issues such as the Citizenship Amendment Act of India. Pakistan, for that matter, has always tried to internationalize the Kashmir conflict, and recently it has found support in Turkey. Last year, the UNGA presidency was held by Turkey, and this had allowed Pakistan to conveniently bring up these issues to target India. In fact, the then president of UNGA from Turkey had even asked Pakistan to bring up the Kashmir issue as its duty, and this stand of Turkey while it was holding UNGA presidency had caused a lot of concern for India. So now that Turkey has been replaced by Maldives as the UNGA president, it's a great opportunity for India to counter Pakistan's propaganda at the UN. So apart from these mutual strategic issues and concerns, they also get an opportunity to work on several global and regional issues. And India and Maldives will have to ensure that they don't squander this opportunity. Now let's take up a column from page number 6 that critically evaluates the controversial development plans that have been proposed for the Lakshadweep Islands. We have been discussing about this topic over the last few weeks, and we have understood that the administrator of the Lakshadweep Islands has proposed a set of reforms and development initiatives under the powers that the center has been vested with under Article 240 of the Constitution. This article allows the President of India, that is essentially the Union Council of Ministers, to make regulations for certain union territories in order to provide for peace, progress, and good government in these union territories. So, under these powers, the administration of Lakshadweep Islands proposed a set of regulations, and these four proposals have triggered a major controversy, even leading to unrest and protests on the Lakshadweep Islands. So, first, let's understand what these proposals are all about. The first proposal is the Lakshadweep Development Authority Regulation, which proposes to promote tourism, that is, island based water villa tourism, on the model of Maldives. Because, see, with regard to geography, Lakshadweep Islands of India shares a lot of similarities with the Maldives archipelago. And just like Maldives, the Lakshadweep Islands is also made up of small atolls, which are essentially coral structures. Just like Maldives has exploited its unique geography to create one of the world's most luxurious tourism destinations, similarly, India is planning to transform the Lakshadweep Islands into a Maldives like island based tourist destination. But to facilitate such widespread tourism activities, it requires a lot of infrastructure on the island, and hence, through this regulation, the administration has proposed land acquisition for public purpose, through which the administration can take up developmental activities, that is, the creation of essential infrastructure, which would eventually create the right grounds for promotion of tourism. The next proposal is to bring in the Prevention of Anti-Social Activities Regulation to deal with any crime or anti-social activities on the islands, and it provides for preventive detention of any elements who are involving in anti-social activities. Then the third proposal is for the Lakshadweep Panchayat Regulation, under which the Union Territory Administration has proposed to withdraw some of the powers that have been vested with the panchayats. And it also proposes to introduce a controversial two-child policy for those who are seeking to contest elections to the local panchayats. That is, if panchayat candidates have more than two children, they won't be eligible to contest these panchayat elections. And the fourth proposal is to bring in the Lakshadweep Animal Preservation Regulation, which seeks a prohibition on the consumption of beef and tries to impose a beef ban on the Lakshadweep Islands. Now, all these proposals have generated a massive controversy because the locals feel that these regulations are being enforced unilaterally by the center through the administration of the Union Territory without holding any consultations with the local people. The writer carefully breaks down why each of these proposals are controversial and why they are not in the best interest of the people of Lakshadweep. It would be important for us to consider his suggestions because the writer happens to be a former IAS officer who has worked in the Lakshadweep Islands briefly in an administrative capacity. He points out that the Lakshadweep group of islands has several unique features, including its unique geography and unique demography. As discussed, the Lakshadweep is made up of a group of islands. Some of them are inhabited and some of them are uninhabited. In many ways, its geography is quite similar to that of Maldives, which is again an atoll state. And considering its unique location and unique geography, we can say that its ecology is very sensitive and vulnerable to various threats. Be it climate change and global warming, or be it haphazard development, or any unregulated economic activities, they could all threaten the sensitive ecology, biodiversity, and environment of the Lakshadweep Islands. Then, along with that, the region has a unique demography, and majority of the local inhabitants are Muslims who speak their own language, and they have a distinct cultural and ethnic identity of their own. In recognition of this unique demography, the local inhabitants have been given the ST status, the scheduled tribe tag has been given to them, in order to protect their rights and their identity. The locals and several experts have argued that these new proposals, which have been brought out by the Lakshadweep administration, directly contradicts and violates the identity and the rights of the locals, and hence they have demanded the center to immediately drop and reject these proposals. See, Lakshadweep is unique in many ways because it has an egalitarian society. The local people, they primarily rely on agriculture and fishing for their livelihood. The main crop which is cultivated is the coconut. The locals, they grow coconut plantations on the islands and they sustain their livelihood through fishing. The people of Lakshadweep have managed to create an equitable society where poverty levels are very low and it is largely seen as an equitable society. Lakshadweep is also known for its high literacy rates and it is especially known for its low crime rate, which happens to be one of the lowest crime rates in the country. Reports of murders, rapes, smuggling, or theft happens to be extremely low on the Lakshadweep Islands, and in many cases it is non-existent. Apart from all these positive aspects, the local people they face many challenges because of the unique geography and location of the Lakshadweep Islands. For them, electricity is a big challenge because here you can't have any power plants. Electricity is largely produced through diesel generators, which happens to be expensive and environmentally unsustainable. The next problem is with regard to fresh water supply. There are no fresh water sources on the island except for a few wells. Hence, some islands have to rely upon desalination plants. The other major challenge is with regard to connectivity with mainland India. All these problems creates challenges with regard to employment as well, and the locals often have to come to mainland India in order to seek out livelihood opportunities. So these development challenges definitely exist in the Lakshadweep, and the government's focus should be on addressing these core developmental challenges. But instead, the government seems to be pushing towards exploitative tourism without consulting the local population. See, with regard to development of India's island territories, that is both Lakshadweep and Andaman Nicobar Islands, there are two strategies that are in place. One is the vision document that was brought out by the Niti Aayog. The Niti Aayog looks at the strategic significance of these islands and proposes an ambitious development initiative to exploit the economic and tourist potential of these islands. But experts have argued that this grand vision of the Niti Aayog might be unsustainable and it might be damaging to the local environment and ecology. And more importantly, it can violate the rights of the local indigenous communities. So, parallelly, there is the Integrated Island Management Plan, which has been brought out by the National Center for Sustainable Coastal Management under the direct supervision of the Supreme Court. This strategy focuses on local consultation and it proposes to base any island development strategy on local needs and local requirements. The first approach, that is Niti Aayog's vision, will only benefit the mainlanders, investors from the mainland, and it hardly seeks to bring any genuine development for the locals. The first approach is largely devoid of local consultation and it could be unsustainable and damaging to the sensitive environment. Because the first approach is largely focused on the strategic and economic potential of these island territories. It is not centered on the identity, rights, and needs of the local communities. Whereas the second strategy, which is supported by the Supreme Court as well, gives the highest priority for local consultation because these island territories of India they are very sensitive, they are very delicate. So instead of promoting an exploitative strategy, it promotes a consultative participative strategy to bring development to these island territories. Now, if you compare this with the vision that the government and the administration has proposed through these four initiatives, it becomes very clear that these proposals are not in line with the needs and requirements of the local people. Right now, the locals are very much content with their agriculture, with their coconut farming, and their fishing. All they are seeking is better connectivity, better employment opportunities on mainland, and better facilities such as electricity, water, etc. But instead, if the administration in the center, if they unilaterally push for exploitative tourism on the lines of Maldives, it might not be best suited for the interests of the local communities. Because see, the Maldives model cannot be simply replicated in Lakshadweep. Because in Maldives, the tourism strategy has certain conditions, there are certain constraints, and there are several regulations in place which naturally promote the protection of the environment. See, Maldives in the first place is made up of thousands of atolls, and only few of them are inhabited. On these inhabited atolls, no tourism activity or no development or construction is allowed. Even land acquisition by investors is prohibited on these inhabited atolls. It's only in the uninhabited islands that luxury resorts and hotels are allowed to operate, where they set up their water villas. And the business model is such that there is an inbuilt incentive for these investors, for these resorts and hotels, to conserve the local environment and ecology. See, the biggest attraction to Maldives is that Maldives has a virgin ecosystem, a largely unspoiled, unexplored marine environment. The coral reefs, the marine life forms, they are the very base of this tourism model. So naturally, resorts and hotels which are investing millions of dollars, they are bound to conserve and protect these sensitive environmental resources because their very business model is based on the environmental well-being of these islands. Now, these development proposals brought out by the administration doesn't guarantee any such environment protection. Instead, it makes provisions for land acquisition by the government in the name of development and promoting tourism, and it allows for land acquisition to be carried out in the name of public purpose. So, here it's very important to remember the observations of the Supreme Court in the landmark Dev Sharan vs. State of UP case of 2011. In this case, the Supreme Court had observed that if the government is pushing for land acquisition by citing public purpose, and if these projects are causing inconvenience to a large majority of the people, then it defeats the very concept of public purpose. So the Supreme Court has always made it clear that when land acquisition is being carried out in the name of public purpose, genuine public interests need to be served and not the larger interests of the investors or the outsiders who have the backing of the state. When public purpose is being quoted as a reason, it should satisfy the interests of the local people. But this is clearly not the case with regard to the development regulations that has been proposed for Lakshadweep. Now let's take up a column from page number 7, written by a senior Israeli diplomat, in which she evaluates the principle of proportionality in a conflict and blames Hamas, the Palestinian extremist organization that operates out of the Gaza Strip, for not only endangering the lives of Israeli civilians by firing indiscriminate rockets at Israeli civilian areas, but she also blames Hamas for endangering the lives of Gaza civilians as well by using them as a human shield. See, over the last month and a half, we have been talking about the Israel Palestine conflict repeatedly. We have understood how this extremist organization known as Hamas, that operates out of the Gaza Strip, opens rocket firing against Israeli civilian areas, leading to civilian deaths. Hence, countries such as Israel, United States, and the others, they have classified Hamas as a terrorist organization. But for many countries, Hamas is not a terror outfit, and they look at Hamas as a liberation movement fighting for the rights of Palestinians, which was snatched away by Israel. So, whenever conflicts and clashes take place between Israel and Hamas, Hamas is known to fire rockets against Israeli civilian areas. And in retaliation, Israel is often said to use disproportionate force. And it is alleged that in the name of counterterrorism and in the name of targeting Hamas, Israel uses massive force against Palestinian civilians as well, particularly in the Gaza Strip, by carrying out airstrikes and military strikes. And this often leads to allegations of war crimes being committed by Israel. These allegations against Israel are based on the argument that Israel doesn't follow the principle of proportionality. Countries that target Israel with these allegations, they blame Israel for using disproportionate force in contravention to international law. So, in this context, the senior Israeli diplomat evaluates the principle of proportionality. See, as per the principle of proportionality, in a military conflict, a responsible state and its armed forces are obligated to use only proportionate force to achieve justified military objectives by always keeping in mind the extent of civilian damage and collateral damage that might arise out of such military assaults. Now, let's say, for example, a hostile state or a non state actor have carried out or sponsored a terror attack against another state. So, in retaliation, if this state, which has been the victim of this terrorist act, if it decides to use its armed force to carry out a retaliatory strike against a military target, then such a retaliation is seen to be justified and it is accepted well within the norms of principle of proportionality. For example, in response to the Pulwama terror attacks against Indian forces, India retaliated by carrying out the Balkot airstrikes, in which the target of the Indian Air Force was the terror camps of Jaish-e-Mohammed located deep inside Pakistan. But on the other hand, let's say to kill one terrorist, if the other country carries out a major strike and results in the death of hundreds of civilians, then this is not a case of justified retaliation because the collateral damage is simply too high. For eliminating one terror camp or for killing one senior terror leader, you can't end up killing hundreds of civilians and say that this is justified action. This would be a clear case of disproportionate force and it falls outside the norms of international law. But at the same time, in military conflicts, there is bound to be civilian damage. Civilians might lose their lives, but all those cases cannot be treated as an act of disproportionate force. If a state, despite knowing that the casualties among civilians is going to be high, despite this knowledge, if it chooses to carry out the attack, then it can be treated as a violation of the principle of proportionality. So, in the case of the Israel Palestine conflict and Israel's use of force against Hamas, especially in the Gaza Strip, is being defended by this senior Israeli diplomat because, according to her, it is Hamas which is endangering the lives of Israeli civilians by opening indiscriminate rocket firing into Israeli habited areas. And she also points out that it is Hamas which is endangering the lives of civilians in the Gaza Strip by using them as a human shield. Because according to her, Hamas, which freely operates in the Gaza Strip, is known to build its rockets and wage its war against Israel by making use of civilian populated areas in the Gaza Strip. As per her argument, it is the Hamas which is placing the lives of Gaza civilians in the line of Israeli fire because Israel has a right to defend itself against these acts of terrorism. In the course of such retaliation, if there is going to be civilian damage and civilian deaths, Israel should not be held responsible, according to this writer, because it is Hamas which is endangering the Gaza civilians by using them as a human shield. Next, in another column on page number 7, the writer argues how a digital e-governance system can actually improve service delivery and how it can help build trust between citizens and the government. See, citizens in general lack the element of trust or faith on their government, especially with regard to service delivery. Because governments generally fail when it comes to quality service delivery, and delays, corruption, and poor quality have become a part and parcel of government service delivery. Say, governments at all levels, be it the center, the states, or the local governments, they all deliver variety of services to the citizens, and especially the local institutions, the local bodies, that is your Panchayat Raj institutions and your urban local bodies. They provide numerous services to their citizens. But in the delivery of these services, there are always frequent delays, frequent mistakes, the quality is very poor, and the system is riddled with corruption. The writer points out that the answer to all these problems lies in digital e-governance. He points out how India's startup ecosystem and how the IT firms of India have transformed the landscape and how they have improved the efficiency and effectiveness of private service delivery. On similar lines, if e-governance, digitization, and IT infrastructure is adopted on a large scale in our governance infrastructure, then the quality of public service delivery will also improve, leading to reduced delays, better quality, and reduction in corruption. He takes the example of Andhra Pradesh, where a foundation known as eGov Foundation has come out with a service delivery platform known as Pura Seva. This e-governance digitized platform is offering citizen services directly through a digital platform across 110 towns and cities of Andhra Pradesh. This platform not only provides for seamless and timely delivery of services, but it also helps in building trust of the citizens on the government because it provides for a feedback mechanism where the citizens can rate the services and they can even air their grievances and raise complaints. The service delivery model of Indian startups like Paytm, Ola, PhonePe, etc., has set a new benchmark with regard to service delivery, and the same can be easily replicated in the government sector as well. So, digital e governance platforms such as Puraseva can transform the service delivery landscape, and it truly allows the citizens to take part in a participative democracy. The potential of e governance is that it can truly enable consultative and participative democracy, where the citizens are not just merely receiving service delivery, but they also help in improving service delivery. For this, there should be adequate opportunities and platforms to raise their complaints and grievances and to receive their feedback. And on the back end, there should be a follow up system which will look into this feedback and these complaints and act upon them immediately. And following a dashboard format to display all the relevant data will go a long way in making public service delivery more transparent and accountable. Now, let's look at a few articles that provide us with important updates. We have this article on page number 8, according to which the Education Ministry has come out with a fresh set of guidelines for making digital education and online education more accessible, especially for children with disabilities. See, we all know that the pandemic and the lockdowns and the closure of schools and colleges has largely shifted education to the online format. And there is always a fear that this paradigm shift in education can promote inequality due to questions of access, especially children and students with disabilities such as visual, hearing challenges, autism, other intellectual and special learning disabilities. They could be more vulnerable at being left out of the education system due to lack of access to learning material on online platforms. The digital learning solutions and education materials should be available in a wide variety of formats so that it is accessible to all students, even to those children with disabilities. So, with this objective in mind, the Education Ministry has come out with a set of guidelines based on four guiding principles. The guidelines stipulate that all education material and resources which is being circulated online or through digital formats, they must be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust for disabled students as well. So it mandates schools, educational institutions, and edtech companies to come out with such educational material which is available in multiple formats, including text, audio, video, sign language, tactile experience, etc. They're also being asked to scale up their evaluation methods to keep in mind children with disabilities. And all these new norms for digital education content has been designed to make education, that is online education, more accessible to even children with disabilities. Next, according to this article on page number 11, the FBI of the United States has run one of the largest sting operations targeted against organized criminal groups and networks. See, organized crime such as drug trafficking, arms trafficking, human trafficking, trafficking of wildlife products, and all other illicit activities are considered to be a grave threat to a country's national security because organized crime is closely linked to money laundering and as well as it is linked with terrorism and insurgency. Today, organized crime even includes cyber crimes, which are sophisticated, and it also covers financial frauds and money laundering that is committed using cryptocurrencies. All these organized criminal cartels, they are known to use encrypted communication to protect themselves from the surveillance of intelligence and security agencies, and they usually carry out their interaction and communication on secure and highly encrypted platforms and as well as on the dark net. A few encrypted communication platforms such as EncroChat and SkyECC were extremely popular amongst organized criminal groups around the world. But a few years back, the FBI and the global organizations and police and intelligence agencies around the world had initiated a crackdown against these platforms. Following this crackdown on these platforms, the organized criminal cartels they were looking for a new application or a new platform through which they could communicate securely. At that time, these organized criminals came across an application known as ANOM, which had to be run on specially modified mobile phones. This platform offered highly encrypted communication for organized criminals, and immediately it became very popular amongst them. So, in countries around the world, organized criminals were using the ANOM platform on specially modified mobile phones. But as it turns out, this was a part of a covert operation of the FBI targeted against organized criminal cartels and their encrypted communication networks. This covert operation of the FBI was codenamed as Trojan Shield. And under this operation, the FBI worked with several security agencies around the world in around 16 countries. And this communication platform known as ANOM had been developed by the FBI itself. So, as criminals were using the platform, the FBI and other security agencies were closely watching their activities. And now they have carried out joint operations in countries around the world to target these organized criminal networks based on the ability of FBI and the security agencies to access and monitor their encrypted communication on the platform they themselves had created as a part of a sting operation. Now, finally, let's look at the mains practice questions. The first question: India and Maldives have an opportunity to work together for changing power structures at the UN. Examine. The second question: Critically evaluate the development plans that have been proposed for Lakshadweep Islands. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the comment section below. So, this concludes our discussion for today. Thanks for watching.